Hello, I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and this series is called I Want to Be a Better Coach. This is January 2025, and this is number 27 of this series. Don't know how many we'll be doing, but right now, here we are. So, this particular episode is about addictions, habits, recovery, patterns, deep recovery, and what makes that important in terms of being a coach and what we coach to. To give you a little backstory, I I got my master's in marriage and family therapy in the 80s, if you will, and I moved to Nova Scotia from Ontario, Canada. I was from the United States, moved to Canada, and went out to Nova Scotia, where they had never heard of marriage and family therapy, a master's program in that. It was way early. They only knew psychologists and social workers, basically. And so at that time, it was difficult for me to get a job. And I finally got a job with the Nova Scotia Commission on Drug Dependency. That's what it was called at that time. And it was a, excuse me, it was a job my title was clinical therapist. And I was in a small town called Liverpool, Nova Scotia, which is on the south shore of Nova Scotia, exceptionally beautiful. And I was working with addicts and alcoholics and codependents and uh, anybody related to people who had an addiction problem. My job was to in a sense, be the therapist to these individuals. And there was also a person who was a counselor, and she was more connected to their day-to-day um, practices of staying sober or clean. My job was to go a little bit deeper on what's in the way of or what's confounding the issues of addictions. So I did that job for 8 years and just I loved it. I was so happy there. But initially, I was like, what am I doing working with addicts and alcoholics? I know nothing about this except for the fact that both my parents were alcoholics. And so it was a real learning for me, especially I was just out of school, even though I was like 30 years old. I was pretty naive and innocent. So it was all new. And I learned so much, not only about what I consider my perspectives on addiction and recovery, but also in terms of the 12-step program and how it's a spiritually based program and why that was so important. And what I realized is as valuable as my master's degree was in marriage and family therapy, I wasn't it didn't teach me anything about the spiritual aspects of who we are as human beings. So I had no concept of that. It was just, people have their addictions and we got to get them over that and what's going to unfold. But for me personally, as well as professionally, I really got the importance of the spiritual foundations of most most practices that can be supportive to an individual. Um, Most 12-step programs. And there's now over, I don't know, there are tons of different 12-step programs and millions of people who are recovering and or staying sober because of those programs. So I think they've got a lot of value. So I was there for 8 years and then I went off and then sailed for a couple of years. And then the short story is I found a school in California, the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, because I wanted to focus on this integration of the spiritual self with the human self. And so the school out in California, the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, now known as Sophia University, was where I ended up. And there I studied spiritual guidance because I thought that would be a good balance to my therapeutic processes and learning. And then I found coaching, which for me was the integration of all of it, the therapeutic elements, the spiritual elements, and the coaching skills and tools that make it to me extremely profound. So that's the background. But what I realized was that, we think of there at that time, it was a person had an addiction, or they might have two addictions, or they might have different diagnoses. One might be alcoholism, one might be depression, or um, whatever people get diagnosed with. I'll just say it that way. But multiple diagnoses, and not just um, an addiction to alcohol. What I realized was people had addictions to other things besides alcohol. The addiction, I had this one young fellow, still, he was one of my best teachers. When I started working with him, he was in high school, and he was like the football star. He had A average, very smart guy, and he was alcoholic. And tough, tough, tough road. He finally got himself sober, and he moved from our little town in Liverpool to Halifax, where he continued to work on his recovery. And every once in a while, he'd call me and say, "You know what, Rosie? I'm not I'm it's not alcohol that's my addiction, or drugs that I'm dependent on. It's that I'm addicted to anger." It's like, oh, that's really interesting. And he would work on that. And then he'd call me again and say, well, I'm not only addicted to anger, I'm addicted to sex. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. So that there's a quality of all different kinds of ways and all kinds of things that we're addicted to really helped me see in the work that I do as a life coach that a lot of these what we call addictions are habits and patternings that have been in place for a long time, and we ignore, avoid, or distract because they're not front and center like alcoholism or substance abuse like food or drugs or all kinds of things. And so when we don't see it, we ignore it basically. And it's easy to ignore because it's part of our consensus reality. It's part, a lot of these things are just normal. The amount of screen time people are on during a day, there's an addictive quality to that, and a habit part of that that people are struggle with to let go of. But they go, hey, it's just who I am, or it's just what I do. But really it's a way, it's a choice, basically. But I'll talk about that in a minute. But all of these kind of things that confound, it's like we think, oh, if we're talking about addictions, we're only talking about substances, alcohol, drugs, food, cigarettes, those kinds of things. But we're not. We're talking about lifestyle, talking about life patternings that may come on. They may be part of us since before we were in the birth process. So I want to talk about that because as a coach, this is what I focus on in a sense that these patterns and habits that people have that we go, oh, it's just what they do. It's like, no, these things can get in the way. These patternings and habits can get in the way of being their authentic self and recovering themselves. I want to talk about that for a second. So we think about recovery. When I've had a cold and I'm recovering from my cold, I'm recovering from this illness or disease. When we think I'm a recovering alcoholic, we're recovering from something. We're recovering from the all the things that happened in the way I was because of my addiction to alcohol. Um, it's it's I just got twisted because I'm not an alcoholic, so I'm talking as if it's me, but it's not. I am an addict. I've been an addict to food, substances, and all kinds of stuff around that. I've been codependent and a wonderful enabler. And also in terms of adult children of alcoholics and all the adult children of dysfunctional families, the patternings that I learned when I was a child and I continued to use as an adult, those are patterns that get in the way of me being me. My point again is I'm recovering, in a sense, I'm recovering myself. I'm reclaiming myself. I'm realizing who I am. And the only way I can do that is to see, oh, here's habits and patterns that I have lived with and thought it was just normal. I just thought it was life. But I realized like, oh man, I think those negative thoughts all the time. And I didn't realize that that was something I did and I could stop doing. So you probably have heard me say this before, that 80% 80% of our thoughts in general are negative in nature. Now that's a habit that we've developed and a habit that we can detox ourselves from. We can stop doing that by choice. We can make all kinds of choices, but that reclaiming or recovering ourselves is what we do as coaches in helping people get what they want and have what they want, have the quality of life that they want. So I'm not necessarily coaching to the addiction, but I see the patternings and the habits that are so part and fundamental to how a person perceives themselves or talks about themselves. And they don't even know that that's, in a sense, an addictive habit or pattern. So addictions will say, and I love this. This is a long time ago. There was a movie that came out called What the Bleep. And they talked about many things, but one of the things they talked about was how when we're taking a substance or when we have a thought, when we have an emotion that triggers a particular hormones in our system. And that triggering and those hormones, there's a place where it's like our baseline, what's normal for us. So growing up in a family of 9 kids, and it was pretty dysfunctional, that level of anxiety and dysfunction was my normal. So I didn't know anything more than just living in that. So I would do things or think things that were part of that normal baseline. It was the hormonal shifts that would happen. When things were really good or happy, it was very uncomfortable because it wasn't the environment that I was raised in. We had fun and all of those kinds of things, but mostly it was pretty dysfunctional and scary and felt unsafe. So that scary, unsafe perspective, the hormones that support that is what I kept creating through my habits and patterns. So that was an addictive patterning of being. And years of looking and noticing, like, wow, look at that. The way that I trigger trauma in myself, like, wow, look at that. The way that I triggered negativity about myself. Wow, look at that. One of the things that was so habitual was that when things go wrong in my house, I felt like I was wrong. I was the one that made that happen, as opposed to, hey, the heater broke, the water heater broke, or whatever goes bad, that it's just something that happens in life. And it's like, oh, no, I'm responsible. I'm the one that made that wrong. That happened. It was like I made myself wrong. That was my come from. That was my habitual place. So in a sense, it's addiction, an addictive patterning to being that wrong, just wrong, unworthy, undeserving, wrong. And it's something that I saw myself as. So as a coach, if I didn't look at those habits or patternings, then I wouldn't see that those things get in the way of me being me in my fullest expression as me. So when we're, as a coach, looking at how are your clients being in their life, quite often they're in these states of angst or anxiousness, anxiety, or fear. And the fear is a patterning or an addictive pattern. And it's, again, part of that baseline. It's part of that place where we say, oh, it's normal to be afraid. But it's normal to be afraid because that we say it's normal to be afraid. But from my perspective, through my all the everything I've gone through, my experience, direct experience, but also working with clients and my trainings, fear is not required here on the planet. We can be afraid, but most of us stay in a state of fear that's habitual and addictive, and we don't know we don't even know we can get out of it. So when we're looking at how are your clients being, that keeps them from having what they say they want, generally it's a habit or a patterning or an addiction to a way of being that might be the way they think about things, negatively about themselves or the world. It'll never happen to me. It's impossible. Emotions. I'm always angry or sad because the world is treating me the way it does, and I'll never get, and they'll never get. those are patterns and habits that interfere with and get in the way of a person realizing the fulfillment of what they want, their heart's desire. So as a coach, not only am I listening to this for my clients or in my clients, but I have to see it myself too. And this is what makes me a better coach. I believe it's I continually reveal to myself, oh, here's another one of those patterns I didn't even see, I didn't even know existed within me. And then I can be a choice to make a difference about that. I have a client, I've talked about her before. I'll call her Marilyn this time. But Marilyn's been a recovering alcoholic for 30 some years. And so she's been able to she doesn't drink, but her habitual pattern is that she is, and she tells herself all this time, I'm less than squat. So this is never going to happen for me because I'm less than squat. I'm undeserving because I'm less than squat. And because she comes from less than squat as a pattern, and it's like just part of what her thinking is, then she has all kinds of strategies to control the world or control people so that she feels better about herself. So we all do these things. We all do these things. I'm just being very general about this, but in that case, her patterning of first coming from believing that she's less than squat, that's something that is not written in stone, but from her perspective, she did not have a different way of seeing herself or experiencing herself. And the patternings that helped her control, we'll say, sanity, the ways that she chose to be herself in order to survive, her survival mechanisms become habitual and a pattern. We don't even know we're doing it. We just do it automatically. And as we become able to reveal these things about us, we go, wow, that's not who I want to be. That's not what I think I am. But this is what we do. So one of the values of having a life coach is that they, as a thinking partner, can help us see these patterns and habits and addictions that we didn't even know existed, that we use to avoid and ignore and deny our life and distract ourselves. For instance, screen time. And we don't even know the degree to which we're not at choice about that. I heard one thing about this person was talking about how we're looking at continually striving to free ourselves up so that we can know ourselves. But by eating particular foods, in this particular case, he was talking about sugar. Sugar is a very toxic substance, and it our minds are influenced very highly by that. The way that we think and feel and the way that we operate when we have sugar, it's phenomenal, the difference between when you eat it and when you don't, truly. And so we say, oh, I'm free and I'm not of any substance. But if we look at the degree to where we're controlled by sugar and the influence of sugar, it's pretty fascinating. And I can say this to you and you go, hey, I would love to get off sugar, but I can't. It's like, okay, great. There's an opportunity to look at the addictive patternings of it. And it's not just, in a sense, the chemical thing. It can be, oh, my friend bakes a lot of cookies and pies, and I love being around her. And so I don't want to not eat her stuff, right? That's a patterning in terms of how we see ourselves and that's an enabling element, or the part of us that says, I don't want to give up my relationship with my friend just because I don't want to eat sugar, or I love eating sugar when I'm stressed and I don't want to give that up. That I don't want to give it up is part of our process. And it's like, wow, but what is it I really want? If I give up, and I gave up sugar, and I've given, and not 100%, but the degree to which that sugar is part of my life, and that's in the form of carbohydrates, of the refined carbohydrates or alcohol. Those things I've minimized a lot because I know how they influence me negatively. And I'm all about recovering. I want to know who I am in my fullest potential. I want you to know who you are in your fullest potential. I want whoever it is that you're working with or living with or being with, I want them to know their fullest potential. I'm not going to say, hey, give up sugar and give up alcohol or give up screen time. I'm not going to say that to you. What I'm going to say is, what is it you want? And what is it you want enough that you're willing to look at some of these shifts and changes, or looking at some of these activities or patterns or beliefs that you're willing to maybe shift just incrementally. We can only shift a pattern one moment at a time. And sometimes I'll have bread, and sometimes I'll have butter, and sometimes I'll have sugar. But I'm much more mindful of that rather than having those things control me. And that's what this is about, is like, what in your life is controlling you? For a long time, I was going through a lot of, we'll say, trauma drama. And I was seeing how that trauma drama is a patterning that is controlling me, and that I can choose differently. Not easy. I can't go, oh, I'll just stop thinking that. It was like a arm wrestling with this part that wanted to stay in fear and panic. And like I said, growing up in a family that was unsafe, that trauma drama element was so embedded in me because of my childhood. It was just the way that I operated. But to come to a point of maturity to say, hey, I can make a difference, I can choose differently, it's amazing what shows up. So, what I want to talk about today, which is, the addiction, which is mostly, well, it's all hormonal. When we chew our nails or tap or, I move a lot. It shifts my hormones. It shifts the hormonal things until it calms me down. When I'm moving a lot, it actually calms me down. So those things we can see and know, and we go, wow, that's really interesting. And we can begin to say, do I want to make a difference? Do I really want the life that I want? Do I really want to influence people in a way that makes their life better? And if you are like me and want to be a better coach, then we gotta look at, how are we looking at ourselves in terms of this, and how are we seeing it in relation to our clients? So I rarely do I say to a client, I mean, they know, everyone, all of us know when we're doing things we shouldn't do. People say it all the time. Oh, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but, and they put that but in, which gives them whatever permission to do what they're doing. But the question is, what is it you're really wanting? And is this habit or pattern getting in the way of that? So again, there's habits, patterns, addictions, and then there's this thing called recovery, which is, I'm recovering myself from this addiction. I am recovering from the substance abuse, or I'm recovering, like we're taking ourselves back. We're taking back and we're empowering ourselves to choose differently. The habit of being on the screen, to looking at Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, Facebook, whatever it is that is in your face when you're doing screen time, that's a choice. And for you to go, wait, I want to make a different choice, that's a good thing. And that's when we start to reclaim ourselves. Quite often, and this may be an assumption on my part, but a lot of coaches don't do their own work. They go, oh yeah, it's just a few hours that I'm doing this, and I'm doing it consciously or choosing. That's one thing. But if we're ignoring and avoiding and distracting ourselves from ourselves, then we're not going to grow ourselves, and we're not going to grow our abilities to support and empower our clients. We can't. We can't. All we do is create more of the same, if you will. That level to which you're able to be present is what you'll create for your clients. My work is to empower you, to empower yourself, to reclaim and see who you are, and the greater capacity you have to do that is the greater capacity you have to bring that to your clients. The third piece of this is working with Marilyn, as I said, she's been in recovery for 30 years, working the 12-step program, and she's recovered herself to the degree that she has. She's reclaimed herself from the patterns of and habits of her addiction to alcohol. But there are these areas where she's still in this pattern. Like I said, she's still operating from less than and all kinds of patternings that she doesn't even know exists. And when we go to these levels, most people are calling it deep recovery and they're going, wow, we're going so deep. And it's yes, we're going so deep, but at the same time, this is everyday practices and patterns and habits every single day. We're just looking at what's happening every single day differently so that they can, we can um, be more at choice. We can become more aware, more conscious, more awake to like, wow, look at, I just did that. And I know the consequences of that. And I don't want that consequence. We become more at choice. The deeper recovery requires faith. It requires letting go of the habits and patterns. Let's say somebody on screen time says, hey, I don't want to miss out on. It's like, well, what will happen to you if you miss out on that? And there's I don't want to miss out. Or there's a scary thing. Something bad's going to happen if or, it took me a long time to stop drinking. I loved my 5 o'clock glass of wine. Didn't want to give that up. Who would I be without that? I didn't want to do it. Who would I be without sugar? Who would I be without a relationship? Who would I be without just fill in the blank? And it can be like, I don't know, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know who I am. I don't know how to do me without that. And that's, I think, fundamental. I think it'll be on my tombstone is, I don't know how to do me doing this. And that's what we come down to. It's like, I don't know how to be with me without my alcohol or without my relationship. I was a relationship addict or a love addict. I couldn't be in the world without a relationship or the striving for a relationship. So alcoholics, love, debt, retail, um, workaholic. I could be part of all of that because they were all ways for me to not have to be really present to myself. I didn't know how to be present to myself, was never taught that, rarely experienced it. And that's what Marilyn is finding out. She's having these experiences with herself and she's going, wow, I kind of like that. I kind of like being me. And it's unusual, and yet she's finding it peaceful and delightful to be herself without the personas and without the survivals, without the need to try to control and the need to perform and improve or prove herself. She's going, wow, I kind of like myself. That's when we're reclaiming ourselves. We're realizing, realigning ourselves with ourselves. And this requires not only the intellectual capacity to think about things and make choices, but to actually experience emotionally the energy of being sad, being scared, being angry, being hateful, being raged, being jealous, the feelings that we have in our bodies and being able to be with those feelings without judgment or without putting them away or distracting ourselves. We want to own all of ourselves. And that's the deep recovery, recovering ourselves at a deeper and deeper level. I'm doing a lot of work with some people that is so extraordinarily wonderful as they continue to reveal themselves to themselves more and more. And it becomes more effortless to go, wow, why would I keep doing this when I can have that? And these are patternings again that have been with us so much we don't even know they exist. And that's part of our role as a coach is to be a thinking partner to go, wow, look, what's showing up for you there? And they go, oh, there's that. And then I do this. And then nothing changes. Like, yeah, exactly. So we become more able to deeply appreciate and value every aspect of our humanness, as opposed to going, that's bad, that's good. And living in the story of who we should be versus, no, who are you? Who are you? Who are you in the expression of you just naturally and normally? Normally? Who are you? And you get to find out if you choose to. And that helps and supports your clients in doing that. Now, this work is not only for me about coaching, but it's about, well, coaching in terms of a way of being, whether you're a sponsor of a 12-step program or a parent or teacher or a coach, an athletic coach, anywhere where you're in contact with people and you want to support them to be their best selves, their fullest self, that's where this work is really valuable. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. You know, the elements of patterns, habits, addictions, doesn't really matter what you call them. They are in a sense, we think they're ingrained, but we can be at choice to shift so many of those things. And my book, Becoming ah, the book, it's called You Know You're Transforming When. It's really about the elements, the little elements of life where you can start to see, oh, I am actually transforming. I'm actually changing. I'm actually shifting. I'm actually being more me. And you can see that. So that's just one of my many books. I have a coaching group, as you may know, if you haven't already heard me say that, where you can join us, and it's a group for coaches who are wanting to continually grow their capacity to be effective as a coach. I also have a newsletter you can sign up for. And down below, if you have particular challenges in your coaching practice that you'd like me to talk about, you can fill that in, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have or address any challenges that you have, because I love doing that. All right. I think that's it for now. And if you liked this or found it valuable, please give me a thumbs up. It helps other people know that I exist. Leave a comment if you'd like, and please share it with other people if you know coaches or maybe beauticians or nurses and doctors that could use this. That would be helpful to pass it on. I'm happy to have you do that. All right. Blessings to you. Bye for now.